Yo, send it. Because that was the catchphrase for this robot dog. Yep. A.X.L has a catchphrase. And it's send it. I guess the best way to describe A.X.L is that it is a mashup of monster trucks and Max Steel while trying to have the storyline of Short Circuit or maybe E.T. or other movies of that nature. The military, or at least a company working for the military, is inventing a new technology, a new weapon that they could send to the military because canines have been man's best friends and have been combat partners for centuries. So let's make a robot dog the new state-of-the-art weapon for the military. Well, that robo-dog escapes. And then a young man, because I don't really want to call him a boy, because it's very similar to monster trucks where it's really a young man, though at least in this one it doesn't imply that he's in high school or something. He's a motocross enthusiast, he does races, he gets stranded by a bully in the middle of nowhere, finds this robot dog, and then they bond and he tries to keep him from the military and yada yada yada. You've heard this story before. Just probably not with a robot dog. You probably heard it with aliens, with monsters, and with robots, but this might be the first robot dog, maybe? Heck, I wouldn't doubt if there's another robot dog movie like this. As you've probably guessed, I did not like this movie. I was bored to tears. The most interesting thing about the movie was not the movie itself, but the fact that I was in a packed audience. Yes, a packed screening for A.X.L on Saturday night. No, Saturday afternoon. It wasn't even night. I guess that's really strange because I've only ever seen 2 trailers for this movie in theaters. And I go to everything that comes out in my hometown theaters. I've only seen 2 trailers for this movie. I don't see advertisements on TV that much. Must be getting around because everyone was there. But to be honest, the audience was the most entertaining thing about this movie. But I'll save that for another video in case I do a My Movie Experience video, because I have just enough to talk about in a separate video of the audience reactions. I can't say it's all awful, terrible. It's going to get a really low score, by the way, but at least from me. But there are a few elements of this movie that I could probably give 2 stars to. A few elements here and there, and that's really stretching it. So to talk about the good, the things that I thought were 2-star worthy in this movie, the CGI and possibly practical effects, because I feel like some of the robotics was practical while other parts are CG. Either that or some of the CG moments were that realistic that it felt practical. It was a little hard to tell, but for the most part, it was 2-star worthy. While most of the acting is awful, a few of the actors in this movie are probably worthy of 2 or 3 stars. The 2 performers that I actually thought did pretty good was the main love interest, who she was a Power Ranger in the Power Ranger movie last year, Becky G, I believe. I thought she was okay. Her character was horrible, underdeveloped, and there was nothing to her character. But as for acting, she handled herself and she was okay. Thomas Jane is also in this movie. which is sad because he's a pretty good actor, and he's barely in it. He's the father figure. He's okay for what's in it. He's okay, but he's Thomas Jane, right? Actually, scratch that. There is one other thing in this movie that I could say was good, or a lot better than I thought it would be. Almost every single character is underdeveloped and terrible and awful, but there is one character in this movie that actually has development and has a nice visual arc where you could tell what his whole deal is, what his motivations are, why he is the way he is, and that is the bully character. One of the antagonists of this movie has a better character development and a better understanding of his motivations than the main character of this freaking film. And yes, this bully character is everything you'd expect in an underdog type of movie. He is a guy that is sponsored. He's a motocross person just like our main character. He's sponsored, he's rich, he has everything he could ever dream of. He's basically the rich boy, spoiled brat who's also jealous because he wants all the attention. Basically, that's all his motivations are, but the movie actually tells it in a nice visual way that's actually decent, where you can look at the character, especially during the party scene. This is where it's all developed, because there's a party scene. He invites our main character, even though you know that he's a bully and you know he's going to double cross our main character in some way, because this is just set up for it. But as he's at the party, and every time he doesn't have anyone's attention, every time people are having fun and at his expense, you can see that he's upset and he just wants the attention, and you understand his motivations. It tells this visually, and it's done, and it's the only visual storytelling in this entire frickin' film. Or at least one that's adequate. So that, I can say, is okay and good. Again, basic stuff, and that's the only thing I can praise about this movie. Where do I even begin with all the bad of this film? Because pretty much everything else that I have not mentioned is incredibly bad. The acting, for one. Other than Thomas Jane and the main love interest, Becky G, other than those two, the acting is atrocious. Now, it's not so bad that it's worthy of a straight-to-DVD movie or something you'd find in a bargain bin. Like, it's not that bad, but it's still bad for something you'd expect on a big screen. Our main character is dull as hell. Sorry, don't know this actor that well. I'm probably going to put his name down because I'm not going to even try to pronounce his last name. But I'm sorry, but the acting in this movie with our main character was more robotic than the actual dog of this film. I'm sorry, he's probably a nice guy, but it was really one of the worst performances of this movie, and it's our main character. Not only that, I think the character development for our main character is really bad. It's just, it starts off with him being like this shy nobody guy, this underdog for this motocross, and kind of shy and awkward, but instead, the acting style makes it feel more bland and dull and robotic than anything else. And this character's motivations and his tone and his attitude will just snap like that. It's almost like he's just going bipolar or something. Like when he actually encounters the dog, there are several moments throughout the scene where I'm thinking, okay, why would this person go back here? Oh, because the script wants him to go back. Let me lay out the scene, right? So, he gets double-crossed by the bullies, and he's left there, hurt, injured, with just enough gas to get back home. And he's in the middle of nowhere, there's this like junk pile. He hears something, so he goes to investigate. All he sees is these glowing red eyes, so he gets on his bike and books it. Just starts driving away. And normally, I think a normal person in their right mind would just continue going, but then this guy stops, doesn't see it's following. Instead of continuing to go, because the script needs him to meet the dog, he's like, I'm gonna go investigate again. So he just goes back without going home or anything, just turns right back around, dog's on the hill, goes down for him, chases after his bike because it wants fuel. Yeah, apparently this high-grade military robotic dog works on gasoline. We as the audience, we can see the dog's perspective at times, like the robotic eyes that are seeing and analyzing things and putting definitions down, and we see that it's going for fuel, but the kid doesn't know that because it's clearly trying to attack him. He narrowly dodges the dog and it impales itself on something, and then he decides, you know what, this thing tried to kill me, I'm gonna help it anyway, and starts helping the dog. And that whole scene, along with other scenes in this movie, he just changes his mind at a whim, and it only feels like, oh, we need him to be like this because the script demands it, not rather than the character developing this sort of mindset naturally. I guess that's the rushed feeling of this movie. And sure, you could say, well, maybe he's a good person at heart and the robot dog is injured, so he's going to help the robot dog. Sure, I guess you could think that. But if a robot dog tries to kill me, or if a robot dog tries to kill you and gets injured, would you keep driving off, or would you actually help the thing? I think most people would drive off. There's even a point where our shy underdog character just goes aggro, just snaps without any sort of development. And I guess you could say, well, he got double-crossed by the bully, but he's not even that mad about that, it seems. He's just more frustrated than angry. And then when he gets time to take revenge on the bully, he goes aggro and sicks A.X.L on the bully. And it's almost like he just completely changed motivations and character, and it's just, who are you now? And I can see a character naturally developing these, changing throughout this movie in this way, but the movie doesn't give time to develop it in a natural way, and it just feels rushed and feels, the script demands this, so let's have him do this. But another really bad character and another really bad performance is the main villain of this movie, the evil scientist, who really isn't an evil scientist, he's just a really bad scientist. I'm not saying bad as in evil, bad as in incompetent. And then because the script demands it, then we have to have this incompetent scientist suddenly be the evil genius scientist that needs to be in this kind of movie. Like, the only reason that the kid has the dog is this incompetent scientist sees that the dog's developing in some sort of way that it wasn't developing while they had it for 6 months, and he goes, oh wait, this dog, because it's having one single interaction with human, is far progressed anything we've ever done in 6 months. It's like we're 6 years ahead of schedule. I'm like, what the hell have you been doing with this dog if one single interaction is better than what you've had for 6 months? And then constantly through this movie, instead of being an evil scientist, he's like, let's see how this plays out. Because throughout this movie, he can see what the dog sees, and sees the interaction that the dog is having with our main characters, and pretty much knows where the dog is, but he's like, no, let's see how this plays out. I want to see how this develops. Let's let the kids have the dog and see what the dog does. Let's see how it pans out. That's his main thing the entire time. Even the moment when the dog is attacked by the bully, because, oh god, the bully in this movie has a frickin' flamethrower because he's a spoiled brat, and I guess has the means to have a frickin' flamethrower. When the bully attacks the dog with a flamethrower and the dog can't defend himself because previously the main character says, you can't attack this bully, and so he's under the dog's protection, but the bullies kill him and the dog's defenseless because it's programming, it's a freaking robot. The scientist goes, let's see how this pans out. And so then when the dog is burned to a crisp, suddenly the scientist goes, no, and starts tearing and throwing computers, and I'm like, dude, you just said, let's see how this pans out. What'd you think was gonna happen? But no, yeah, his character was horrible, and the acting for that character was horrible as well. The main villain and the main character, worst actors and worst characters of this film. That's not a good sign. Also, the story, very basic. It's all the elements of something like Short Circuit or Monster Trucks or E.T. or Max Steel. Things of that nature where a boy finds either a robot or an alien or a dog and is like, hey, let's be best friends, takes care of it, evil government wants that thing back. Everything you could imagine is in this movie when it comes to that storyline, and it's basic and not developed in a way that's detailed or feels like it's natural. And so it just feels like a rushed version of all those movies, like the bare minimum basics without anything of quality. God, the dialogue is really on the nose, really stupid. To give you a little flavor of the dialogue in this movie, there's a point, like I've mentioned previously, where our main character goes aggro and sicks A.X.L on the bully because the bully wants to take the main love interest away from their second new hiding spot. And so again, he sicks A.X.L on the bully. A.X.L puts his paw on the bully's chest and is almost crushing him, but pretty much just pinning him to the ground. And as the bully's pinned to the ground, I think the dialogue went something like this. Give an underdog nobody a little bit of power, and it all goes to your head. Mine might be a little bit more on the nose than the actual movie. I can't remember the exact thing. All I remember is, oh my god, they actually said this in a movie. Or at least this movie. Like, it's almost something you'd expect in satire or parody, but this movie isn't that at all. It's serious. And not only that, the worst part of this movie is what's supposed to be its heart. It's supposed to be the best thing about a movie where it's a boy and his dog, or a boy that finds a robotic monster and becomes its friend. There is no heart to this movie. There is no bond with our main character and the dog, the robot dog. There's nothing. It doesn't give any time for these characters to develop and have a bond or have a friendship. And ultimately, the movie makes it seem more like this robot really doesn't have feelings like they say in the trailer. It really doesn't have any sort of intelligence beyond its robotic programming. Throughout the movie, it doesn't give the robot dog any time to develop anything, and so ultimately it just feels like a robot, and you don't, at least I don't really care about it, because it gives no opportunity for me to care about it or the boy, young man. And yes, you can pinpoint little things here and there that say, hey, this shows that it might have some more intelligence beyond its programming, but a lot of it can be explained away. This movie tries to go the self-sacrifice route with the robot dog, and I was feeling nothing for it. Though, before that, this movie also reminded me of The Space Between Us, in the fact that the young people of this movie, the main character and the love interest, get away with a few things that there's no consequences for whatsoever. It's mainly one scene, but it's so brushed aside that it's like, wait, you're not gonna develop any of this? You're not gonna give consequences for the robot having done this? Nope. Okay, moving on. The dog hacks into the gas station so that they get fuel because they don't have any money for gas. So that's fine, I guess. But then the robot hacks into the ATM without them asking it to, and suddenly all these $20 bills start pouring out and all the money of the ATM fall out. They take it and they run, and then even as they're driving off, they're like, look at all this money, raining money. They do that in the car, and I'm like, and there's no consequence. There's like, okay, they got all this cash from the ATM. Okay, I guess you stole, and I guess that's fine. Just like in The Space Between Us, they steal several cars and no consequences for that whatsoever. Also, do you want to know what the name A.X.L represents? Well, A.X.L is the name of the machine, right? And the A.X.L stands for something. Well, what does it stand for? Attack, exploration, logistics. These scientists didn't think the name through, did they? Sounds like it doesn't even... It sounds stupid. That reminds me of how this movie begins. The most boring, stupid way possible. If the movie tried to make some effort to make something entertaining, good, action-packed, maybe they'd start with the dog escaping, maybe an action sequence of him escaping, or maybe have it more like a horror movie and kind of scary as the dog is attacking and escaping while soldiers are trying to stop it, or security, or someone going through the place and seeing the claw marks and seeing the aftermath of the escape. No, it doesn't start like that. Instead, it starts with a presentation to the military on what the dog is, the robotics, the machine is, what it can do, and here, this is what we can make you. Fund us. That's how the movie starts. A video, a presentation of the company Canine Engines or Canine something pitching this robot dog to the military. That's a fun way to start a family movie. And I just got to thinking, this movie leaves one loose end and doesn't really explain anything about what happened after this. Of course, the evil canine corporation investigates, finally does something, investigates the main character's home, where his father is, and so a guy comes knocking, he's like, I'm the government sort of thing, here, I have a gun, let me in, I want to find your boy and the device that he may have had, and then, so starts searching all the boy's stuff, and Thomas Jane, while the guard is distracted, takes a bow and arrow, aims it at the guard, and is like, put down your gun, then ties him up in a chair, and then that's the last we see of that guard or Thomas Jane throughout the entire movie. Did he let the guard go? Did he call the police and the police take him? Did the evil corporation come back for its guy? Who knows? Who cares? Just leaves you hanging. But back to the sad scene of this movie. I feel like I have to talk about it. But it contains spoilers because it's the end of the movie and it's this self-sacrifice moment, and it could spoil things for people, but to be honest, it would save you a whole lot of time hearing this, because if you hear this, most likely you'll think, wow, that is really stupid. I'm not going to see this movie. But I'll save it until after the score. So the score for A.X.L, surprisingly, because of some elements that I give 2 stars to, it boosts this movie up to 1 star. There's a lot of things that I would score 1 and a few things that are 2, so it averages to 1 star. So again, spoilers, gonna talk about the sad scene because it's really dumb. So at the end of the movie, they defeat the bad guy, I guess, which they don't really do. The military does, because the corporation that is a military hired corporation to make this military weapon is called Canine. It's like Canine something. I can't remember if it's Canine Engineering, Canine something. But I guess the bad scientist did some shady things by letting everything pan out and not capturing the dog, and so one of the associates is like, hey, military, you gotta come. And so the military arrests him, the bad scientist, but they want the dog still, so they're after the dog, and our main hero and the dog, they make a run for it, and they start going down this area. Well, it's gonna lead to a cliff, and the dog can sense that, and the dog is sending the message through the guy's helmet, but they're like, oh, let's keep going, let's just keep going, and they fall down this cliff, which is actually this really steep hill, and they're rolling down it for 30 minutes, and the main character breaks his arm, and he's like, A.X.L, go, just leave me, but they bonded because there's this device where it's in the trailer, there's this device that he pricks his thumb on, and so now the dog obeys everything he says, and so the dog has to sort of shuffle between the orders of leaving him, which is following his orders, or protecting the guy because he has to protect him because they bonded with the thumb prick. And so then the dog runs off, and it's running and running, and the drones are hitting him and shocking him because there's these drones that this company has made, which attach to the dog and shock it. They're like Hornet drones or something like that. But the dog's running out of steam, and the helicopter's coming, and there's a protocol that these dogs have, which is to self-destruct so they don't go into enemy hands. And so the dog looks back at our main character and says his catchphrase, "Send it." The catchphrase, by the way, only reason the dog mimics this and says this is because the bully tricks our main character when he abandons him in the middle of nowhere by letting him do this really awesome run on the motorcycle, and then as they're videotaping him and distracting him, they're putting some stuff into his fuel tank, something bad, and he goes, "Before you make this sick jump, what do you want to tell people?" And our main character goes, "Send it," and then gets on his bike, crashes, and then they leave him. And then they send the video on YouTube making fun of him. And so the dog hacks into the phone, sees the video, or the GoPro, sees the video, sees him saying "send it," and so is like, oh, that might be the human's catchphrase, let's say that. And so the dog says "send it" 3 times in this movie, the 3rd time being the sad moment, which is the last message that he's giving our main character before he dies, and says "send it," and then explodes in slow motion and with sad music. And I'm thinking, what? And then this movie has the gall to have an Iron Giant ending, basically. You know Iron Giant, when he saves the town from the missile and explodes and becomes a real hero, and then sometime later, because the robot, the alien robot, has the ability to regenerate and reconnect all of its body, and then the ending of the movie is it's slowly reassembling and you're like, okay, he's gonna come back to life, yay, happy ending. A.X.L tries to do this. The dog blows up. 6 months later, our main character and the love interest are a couple now. They're going off to college. They have a husky puppy, and evil scientist is locked up behind bars, telling the military girl that captured him and that was in charge of him that she's like, where's the code? Where's the code? Where's the code? And he's like, the code is evolving. It's out there now. We better find it before it finds them. I guess the code is the thing's soul as it hacks into our main character's phone, sending information on how to rebuild it. So it tries to pull off an Iron Giant that way. And I could care less. So, did you see A.X.L? What'd you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my movie reviews or countdowns of this year, of previous years. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was just my opinion.